Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle from WeAreSC.com. We have the usual crew, a lot of the usual I was going to say suspects. I guess we're that too. Subjects. We've got some recruiting talk, exciting recruiting stuff going on. We have some good stuff there. We're going to talk some more position groups, and we're going to continue our pop quiz game. See who has good answers, who has terrible answers. We'll see. They'll say things. I'll agree or disagree. Okay, guys. Every time we do a show, usually we do a show and it gets posted the following day. Every time we do a show in the interim between the taping and the posting, we get commitments. This happens so frequently that actually Lincoln Riley called and asked if we just do a show every day. We'd have 276 commitments in the recruiting class right now if we did that. I'm not willing. I don't want that many recruits. I think we should stick with 30. We got 3 last week after we finished taping. I think all 3 were announced before the show came on, which always means people are complaining that we're not up to date. We're not. We're doing this on Monday. It's going to come up on Tuesday. Anything that happens between now and tomorrow, commitments, world wars, whatever it is, we're not going to know about. But Mark Culkin does know about our 3 new commitments. Mark, who are these guys? Give us the very quick rundown, names, who they are, position, and then we'll launch into a free-for-all about what we think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say you had a bad week when you get 4 in 4 days, right? Especially, you get Easton Taffa, who's a giant offensive lineman from the state of Utah. Eric said that might as well just declare that East California. That's part of USC's backyard now. 6'5", 290 pounds. I believe he's being recruited to play center in the future at USC. He's definitely an interior offensive lineman, but I think that the trained eyeballs, see him at center. Then you also had, same day, you got Trent Mosley. Decided, you know what, I want to tell my mom and dad, who both went to Notre Dame, I'm sorry, but I look better in cardinal and gold than green and gold. So you get the wide receiver from Rancho Santa Margarita Catholic. Carson Palmer is the head coach there. He's a 4-star wide receiver. He is a playmaker, the guy you're going to put in the slot. He's what, 6 foot, roughly 5'10", 5'11", somewhere in there, 170 pounds. Cuts on a dime, makes people miss, catches every ball that's thrown his way. He's got Velcro hands. So I think USC fans are going to really love him. And then just because it was a Friday night and you needed to get a Friday news dump, USC added one more to their class of 2026. And it was a top 100 player. So they went into the state of Texas. They cherry-picked, his name is Trojans Winfield, 6'4", 290-pound defensive end, edge rusher, in the similar mold of an Anthony Lucas, I would say. So yeah, pretty good week for USC. And that just, further put a stranglehold on their #1 class. And look, the second we're done recording the show, there's probably going to be 2 more recruits that we got to talk about. So, yeah, hopefully.
Let's start with Mosley. Eric McKinney, what do you think about this commitment? I'm pretty excited about it after watching his highlights.
Just a football player. Just a football player. Amon-Ra is the guy that sort of gets brought up with him. Now, Amon-Ra physically what was like not maxed out in high school, but you could tell that he had a Mr. Universe dad and had been lifting weights since he was 5 years old. I mean, like that was it. So that's not the type of guy, but it's just he's going to catch every single thing you throw at him. He's going to make a guy miss. He's going to make a great football play every time he's out on the field. Mosley's the same kind of guy, really good after the catch. I don't know if you lined him up with the best athletes in the country, if he would run with those guys or do that type of stuff. He'll play football and he'll make plays for you every time he's out there. So again, we're going to talk about this a lot, I think, with this class. He's a local guy that would have gone to Washington, Utah, Oregon State, whatever they are, whatever the schools are, they would have come in, gotten him, and he would have put up numbers and done really well at another school if you're looking back at the last 3, 4, 5, more than that classes. So again, when you start to hear USC talk about we're getting the local guys, we're getting the local guys, he's on that list. If you put together that list early on in this class, he's absolutely on it as okay, make sure he's a local guy that you go get. So again, a really good football player. I don't know if he's a first year guy who's contributing on the field, but I'll take the over on his kind of career totals at USC at this point.
Yeah, and it's a nice twofer, right? Because you get a guy that's a really good football player, and you keep him away from Notre Dame. So that's always nice. Yeah, I don't know about the Amon-Ra comparison. I mean, maybe in terms of his ability to be a technician or route running, I don't know, maybe, but he's not built like him. Trent Mosley is not pushing up 360 pounds on the bench press. He's a good run after catch guy. I don't know that he has elite straight line speed, but he has a lot of quickness and really good vision. He's a guy. He's a guy that I think is going to be a pretty capable slot receiver, maybe a Deontay Burnett type, maybe. I don't know. But good player, and you know that he plays against good competition. He plays in the best league in the best high school football conference anywhere, and so he's playing against good guys every week. Any other thoughts on Mosley before we move on to the big guys?
I wouldn't discount his toughness, though. I mean, they've lined him up at running back as well, so he's willing
Yeah.
to take a hit and go between the tackles. So, like I said, Eric's to take the over on him. He's no one really thought much of Makai Lemon in the class, thinking, well, he's going to be, a third guy. Let's not sell Trent Mosley short, is all I'm going to say.
Agreed. I don't know that Mosley is quite as big as Makai is either, but you're right. He's a tough guy. They run him off tackle on the goal line all the time. A lot of his highlights are tunnel screens, right? They're just getting the ball. They're just getting the ball in his hands as quickly as they can and letting him make people miss. He's a good football player. That's a good pickup, and it hurts the Irish. So, two cheers for that. Okay, let's talk about the big kid from Utah. I know USC is looking at him as a center. If he's really 6'5", that is a tall center. I mean, the average NFL center is like 6'1", 6'2", maybe. That's a tall center. So we'll see whether that sticks. But this is a guy who I think a month or so ago nobody thought USC had a great chance at, and now they're pulling a big time interior offensive lineman out of Utah or California East, and that's a good pickup. Turning out to be a pretty good offensive line class, I think. What do we think about Tafa? What should people know about this kid?
Well, I think an important thing to know is that he's from Corner Canyon High School in Utah. And of course, we all know that Dart, the former Trojan quarterback, who is going to be drafted highly, I think, in the NFL. And the fact of the matter is once you start pulling in guys from Corner Canyon, you're doing well. You can talk about center. I think he might be more of a guard watching him on film. But either way, he's very aggressive on his film. Really goes after people, even if the play is away from him. He's in search. He's a search and destroy offensive lineman, and you gotta like his aggressiveness. That's what you need overall, no matter what conference you're in. But playing in the Big Ten right now, today's Big Ten, you really have to go after it on the ground in terms of the physicality. And you never really know how they're really going to be until they're actually playing against somebody else. But it looks, at least if you're going to make a forecast, he's a pretty good forecast based on his intensity, momentum, his strength, his desire. So I'm pleased with him. And plus, I know that Utah was looking after him. And that's always a good sign if I see that Utah is recruiting him. I think the thing to remember about him, honestly, is that I believe he had family in Orange County, and then they moved away. And of course, it doesn't hurt to have your mother be a big USC fan, which seems to be the deal here. So there's nothing wrong with having a little connection there. As far I was going to say about Mosley, I was impressed by what he was doing. He reminded me of some of the smaller slot receivers USC's had in a long time. He reminds me of, if you bring out names, you'd say, oh, yeah, okay. The question about is he that fast? But I tell you, I did see that he seemed to not get caught from behind too often. So it looks like, at least at the high school level, he's fast enough. And I think, as Chris pointed out, Trinity League is the best league in the United States in high school. And you get most people that are experts in it. And I get all sorts of information on it. And even the guys from the Southeast Conference are aware of the Trinity League. So that's a good sign.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, now the Texas kid, we'll see where he ends up. I think, he's about 290 now. I think he's probably a 3 technique more than an end, but big kid with a great offer list. So you look at the programs that have offered him. It's everybody who can play football wanted this kid. Texas is still going to come after him. You can be sure of that. It's not going to be easy to hold on to a Texas kid, although Texas kids are more likely to leave the state than kids out of the deep South, I think. All right, so what do we think about Winfield?
I
think he's great. By the way, he's explosive and strong and big. It's exactly what you want out of a D lineman.
Well, what I'm most happy about is that these recruits have made you happy. I've never seen you happy as a lawyer, and that's a good sign.
It's been a long time, Greg, since USC gave me things to be happy about. So I'm willing.
Well, I think you speak for a lot of people. I think what really has to be addressed, besides Winfield, is that who his defensive line coach is going to be at USC, because Henderson's making a big move now. Big move, with defensive linemen. And I tell you what, I am not worried about that they'll have too many defensive linemen or whatever. I think, he is probably recruiting as well as anybody in the country, especially for defensive linemen. I think one of the advantages Ohio State had in recruiting was Larry Johnson as their defensive line coach for a long, long time. He was hard to, when he was recruiting somebody, he was like their Marv Goose, so to speak. But no, I think Winfield is a player. And again, I'll tell you what, this class right now, and it's refreshing to say this, is getting stronger by the day. And at some point, when you look at what the players are saying about why they committed, they all say, oh, this is going to be a fabulous class. Once that attitude is there with these players, I agree somewhat with Chris. There's always a threat in Texas that someone's going to, pull out an oil well and give it to somebody. But, the bottom line is, these defensive linemen know who coached, the Rams, NFL, future superstar. And that's important for them to know. And they know it.
He's a fantastic position coach by all accounts. He also has charisma that's off the charts, right? I mean, he really does. We'll talk more about a comparison for him later in the show, but Eric Henderson, you're right, has been making a huge mark. And I think at this point, Eric Henderson can walk into any state in the union and have a legitimate chance of pulling out a 4 or 5 star defensive lineman. I mean, and that's not an easy thing to do, but he's in a position he can do that. Probably doesn't hurt that he has more money to play with than they have the last few years. But even so, there are lots of schools with money, and there are lots of schools with a tradition of playing good football. Eric Henderson is a threat to all of them right now.
Well, Jamion was the #1 guy on Texas's, big board, so to speak. I'm also wondering, what is his position going to be eventually at USC? Is he going to be an interior guy? Because he's got that size now where you can play him at a 3 or you can play him at a strong side defensive end.
Just kind of he looks like an interior guy to me, but then again, I haven't talked to Eric Henderson about it, so I don't know. But he's a good-looking football player. Look, you have to have the Toffas and the Winfields. You have to stack these guys up because you have enough guys that are that big and that talented. You're going to be able to put good units on the field, and you're going to have depth. And it's been a long time since USC's had depth, especially on the defensive, frankly, offensive and defensive lines. This class This class, when combined with the last two, I think has completely changed the narrative as far as defensive line goes, right? USC is going to stack up a lot of really talented bodies going forward on the D line. And the offensive line is coming around also in a way that you look at this class and think it's probably going to be a top 3 or 4 offensive line class in the country too. So everything seems to be going well. Look, there are rumors out there. Do we peddle in rumors? Of course we do. And so you have the rumors about the modern day kids, the tight end Bowman, who seems to be very interested in USC. Tom, the defensive lineman, also seems to be interested, though still in Oregon commit at this point. Those are guys that we really do need to land. Who are the other must gets in this class? The uncommitted guys.
Everybody
give me one or two.
Everyone on that 2-day visit from June 17th through the 19th. Every single one of them. Mark Bowman, Tom, Talanoa Ely.
Those are my 3. I know there's more on that list.
Take the other 2, Eric.
But no. I'm just saying, if you're talking about must get, right? Must get those 3. There are a lot of, and then I'd like this guy, and then I'd like this guy, and then Brandon Arrington, Devon Benjamin, like there are guys, a couple of the 27 kids that have now gone up to 26, Haven Finney, guys like that. But Tom, Bowman, and Ely, I think are the look, the narrative has changed with recruiting, and you can hear that with some of the guys that were slow played and like lowballed are the 2 most used phrases in recruiting right now, right? I didn't like my NIL offer, and I didn't get an offer early enough. You hear those all the time, and whether it's true or not is kind of what side of things you're on. Are you on the school side? Or are you on the recruit side? But the guys who have felt like USC was slowly going along, or I didn't hear from them as often as I would like to. The one thing in terms of that narrative that has absolutely changed, that's not happening anymore. Guys are hearing from USC consistently, constantly, just all the time. And what it used to be maybe once every month or few weeks is, I'm not going to say daily, but they are hearing from USC as much as other schools now. And that's a huge change. And that is something where other schools had a head start with a lot of these guys because they've been doing it for 3 years, 2.5, 3, 4 years with some of these guys. The ground that USC has made up in the last 2 months is remarkable. And they are in it for all of those guys that they probably weren't in it for November, December of last year. And we'll, again, Tom, Mark Bowman, Ely as the 3 guys that would, I think I think those 3 guys would fully turn Southern California back to USC.
There's another modern day guy.
3.
There's another modern day guy I might add to the list, right? Cody Green. You're talking about. I don't know whether they can make a dent with him or not. But my view is that when you're talking about not just local schools but modern day, it used to be that there was a pipeline straight from modern day to USC for the best players. That has to be the case. This is the elite high school football program in the nation, and at this point, I'm not sure it's close. USC cannot afford to be losing out on modern day's best players to a program like Oregon. Look, modern day is a good academic institution. These kids don't need to go to a 2-year college that takes 4 years to get through like Oregon. They can go to a real academic school and play football, and should. USC has to turn that around, and so those 4. I don't know that I'd say any of them are must gets. The program can survive without any of those guys. But you can't lose out on elite defensive tackles and elite left tackles from modern day if you're USC. You just cannot.
This is the Poly 5 redux. This is Poly 5 2.0. USC got what, 4 of those guys in that class? If USC can get 4 of modern day's top 5 players, USC is back in business. They can say step aside. You're going to have to go through us now for recruiting, because that's the same situation.
Yeah, agreed. And one of those
And Ryder Lyons, right? Ryder Lyons didn't get mentioned in that group. He's obviously a gigantic one. Pepe coming out from IMG on Mark's June 17th, right? Visit, and then Finney's in that group as well on the 17th. So
I would badly like to land Ryder Lyons. I don't know that I believe there is a must-get quarterback recruit these days. I'm not sure that exists. USC's recruited a couple of promising guys. They probably work out. If they don't, then I think there's a good chance that USC will go and get somebody out of the transfer portal. Quarterbacks bounce around so much these days. I just don't know. I think I would almost never say that there's a must-get wide receiver. Chris Henry is a guy that USC could really use, right? That guy's a really good football player. You can find wide receivers. You can. But what you can't always find in Southern California are elite defensive tackles and elite left tackles. Those guys you got to get. You cannot lose those people. So
to the same school every year. So I mean that's really what it is, and that's where I think those three and right, Cody Green's not a Southern California native, and if everyone was having to recruit him out of Washington, it's a little bit of a different story. So he's not fully the modern day kid, but for sure. I mean, once you enroll at modern day, then that's what you're seen as when you're coming out of there. Yeah, USC should be able to just collect those guys when it's going well.
Green, you say he's new to modern day, right? So to speak. He was
yeah, he didn't grow up here and has been like a Southern California recruit forever.
For people that don't know, where did he come from?
From Washington.
State of Washington, right. And he is an offensive lineman. He is, and he's getting his popularity, if you want to use that word, has gotten better and better. Sometimes when you're in a modern day program, really, really good players don't get the publicity they might have gotten somewhere else. But eventually, when they have their turn, like Green's going to get, the guy that really intrigues me, honestly, is Bowman. I think that he's a real stud. He reminds me of the tight ends that gave USC a lot of problems in the past.
Yeah.
And I think you get him going there. And I think Tom, to be honest with you, from my perspective, I think he's a must get. I think he's right there. Because once the season really starts, you're going to hear his name all over the place, which is important for players that they're recruiting in Southern California that could join him. So, yeah, I think if they turn the corner with these multitude of modern day players, I think they're going to be in a position to return to their prominence of getting players from the Monarchs. Oregon will still be a problem. Oregon seems to have an inroad at modern day for the moment. I think that's, when you're having to lose to them and what have you, it seems like longer than a moment. But I think SC has a chance if they get these modern day guys to really change a lot of things in Southern California, which would be a very refreshing sight for all USC fans.
Yep, I agree with all that. Okay, well, I'm quite sure now that all of those guys will commit overnight since we're talking about them. So if you're watching this video, they've all already committed. Don't worry about it. Okay, let's go back to our position group discussion. We have been through defensive line, quarterbacks, and running backs over the last couple of weeks. So we have a handful still remaining that we want to get through before spring practice starts. I have a pick today, and so does Mark, but because I'm a nice guy, I'm going to let Mark go first. Mark, what's your position group?
I think we got to start with the wide receivers. And let's just start with, you got Jacoby Lane and Makai Lemon. Though you don't have any question there. You know who number one is, and who 1A is, who 1B is, however you want to slot them. It's who's that third wide receiver? Who's going to step up? Lincoln Riley's offense runs a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. So is DJ Jordan ready to, take the baton? Is he ready as a true sophomore to run and take it over? Or is Jay Fair, the transfer from Auburn last year, is he ready to take that veteran presence? USC is probably going to go back to the portal during the spring window when it opens. They brought in Prince Strawn, who is very similar to Jacoby Lane, but you don't have a lot of veteran, a lot of experience in that room right now. You've got talent, you just don't have a lot of experience. So that's kind of the situation with the wide receivers right now. I think everybody is going to agree with me. If you don't, let's talk about it now. Mekhi is going to step into the same role he had last year. He'll probably lead the team in receptions, lead the team in yards. Jacoby Lane will be all he does is catch touchdowns guy. He'll increase that number from 12 to, I'm going to say he's going to get close to 20 this year. I mean, these are their NFL contract years. They're true juniors. If you're not doing it this year, when are you going to do it? And they're being paid to do it this year too. I mean, that's a whole nother aspect of this. I think USC made that business decision. We're going to take Jacoby, we're going to take Mekhi, and we're going to build that room around those guys. You can't have 4 individuals in there who theoretically are number 1 guys. So now you've got Deuce Robinson at Florida State, Zacharias down at Georgia, and USC's got a room full of young guys. You got Corey Sims, Tanuk Hines, which is, speed and more speed. You got Romero Eisen, again, more scoots with those feet. Good room, just not a lot of experience once you get past Mekhi, Jacoby, and the transfer Prince.
Okay, Eric, who are guys number 3 and 4 in that room? We all know who 1 and 2 are. Who are 3 and 4 this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think Prince Ron is your second on the outside right now. I'm interested to see where DJ Xavier Jordan ends up, because I think he's maybe an outside guy, but I think he can work inside as well. And so where he lands, it might be something where, look, let's find a spot for him so we can get him into the rotation and get him on the field, because I really like Mekhi after the catch. Jacoby obviously right. He can do what he can do before the catch and then get himself to where he can be, a target no matter where he is. I don't know. I don't know if there's a guy that you worry about, the deep ball or things like that. And so if Xavier Jordan can be that guy, I think that that's something where you want to put that on the field and open things vertically. And so that's where I think he has a shot to be that. But Jay Fair was interesting to me last year. Like, he played in that Michigan game and made some big catches, and it seemed like, okay, here he comes, and then just nothing for huge chunks of the year. And so getting him another year, he becomes kind of an intriguing guy. But I think you're looking for like that the X factor or whatever in the wide receiver room. Jordan would seem to have a shot to take a big jump this year. Mark threw out 20 catches for Jacoby, or 20 touchdowns for Jacoby near there. 16's the record. Like, closing in on 20 would blow the USC record, I should say.
7 in the last 3 games of the year. I see him
continuing that would seem to be crazy, but it's also like, if you're within the 20, I mean, I know they tried that sometimes where they just punted up to him inside the 20, and it didn't always work, but yeah, there were times that it seemed like it did. So I think that we talked about this with Lincoln Riley's offenses. He's had offenses where you've got one guy, right? CeeDee Lamb is going to catch 100 balls this year, and that's our guy. He's also had offenses where, kind of what they tried to do last year, we're going to spread it around to 8 different receivers, and it's worked. And I don't think you can say it worked last year. And so I think you're okay if that room is pared down, but if one of those guys gets nicked or can't play in a game or something, like, you better have some guys that can go. I don't think you need to go into a game saying we want to get 6 different guys 3 catches in this game. But yeah, who's 3, who's 4, who's ready to go if you need them? That's going to be big getting ready for the year.
Well, here's the question then, Eric and Chris and Greg. Which one of these true freshmen that came in are going to be able to contribute this year. And let's not forget Josiah Zamora. He did get a scholarship. He's somebody who can play the game. But you got Corey Sims, Tanu Kynes, Romero Eisen. Which one of those three has a chance to play this year?
I think
I'm going to guess Hines. I'm going to guess Hines because I like his speed and he's got pretty decent size. But it could be any of the three. The thing is, wide receiver is probably the easiest position to step in and play well as a true freshman. So they all have a chance to do it, especially when you don't have to be the number one guy, and they're not. Mekhi Lemon's going to have 1,200 yards receiving this year if he stays healthy. He's going to be the go-to guy. He's too reliable. He's too good after the catch, and obviously, Jacoby Lane is going to be a threat that people have to worry about. So if you have enough talented guys, even if they're young, you should find somebody who can be a solid number 3 option. I'd go Hines, but it could be any of them. It wouldn't surprise me if it's Jordan either. This is a guy who was in a very crowded room last year, but has talent.
I think it's easier for a true freshman receiver to make an impact inside, but with Hines and Eisen, if those are your interior guys, neither one of them are here for spring. So that, it's not like you could say they can't make an impact, but is it more likely as an early guy? Probably. So those are two guys that I would have loved to see, early and get involved in spring, because right now on the inside it's Mekhi, and then like you said, if Josiah Zamora had to take snaps for this team, would I be confident in him? Sure. But it's not like they rolled him out last year when you needed, when you needed maybe an answer inside or something like that. So we'll see. The top two, I'll take the top two healthy going into every game. Throw them 80% of the balls this year. Sounds good.
You go back and look historically, the position groups where you've had freshmen really step up. Really, at every school this is true, but at USC's had a ton of freshman wide receivers that put up really good numbers from day one. I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying any of these guys are going to be Robert Woods, but I mean, there have been enough guys that step in as freshmen and you can rely on right away. Mike Williams, is anybody going to put Mike Williams numbers? Probably not. But once you got past K-State, that guy was the best receiver in the country, not named Larry Fitzgerald. So I think there's enough talent there that if the two key guys stay healthy, you're going to be able to find a surrounding cast, I suspect. But you only have 2 proven guys. That's not ideal. Greg.
Yes, sir.
You want to say anything about the wide receivers? You good?
It's always interesting, the wide receivers, because when you watch them in practice, it's interesting to see all the different receptions they make, their athletic ability. And for me, I want to see what their blocking is like. And, what you see in practice is important, because if you can't do it in practice, the game is kind of a different ball game. So I don't know with the younger players, and this is what always hesitates for me to go overboard. I agree with Lemon. I agree with, Jacoby also, but I don't know how the others are going to be when they actually get in front of a big crowd with TV cameras. I think it's for purpose of experience, it will be nice to have the 2 schools that we're opening up against. I don't think that there's a lot of pressure on that. There'll be pressure to do well in the game, no doubt about it. But the overall, maybe the Clay Helton thing will have a kind of an exciting part because it's Clay Helton. But by and large, we're not talking about, if the third game was Notre Dame, I'd be concerned because you have to catch the ball, and we've already done this, so I don't want to go over it. You need a quarterback that consistently can get them the ball, and hopefully, that they have that. But I want to see these young players catch the ball in front of a crowd. That's probably the one thing that I'm disappointed about a spring game. I'm not against not having it. I understand it completely. But at least in a spring game with TV cameras and stuff, there is a little bit of sense that this just isn't a normal practice. There's a little intensity involved with fans in the stands and yada, yada, yada. So we'll see how it goes. I don't think I can, predict some guys that are coming up. They're going to be the man. I don't know. We'll see how, you know, the head football coach, what he thinks is the man, and how many times these guys get in and the play is called to them. To be honest.
Yeah. Okay, so we're down. We started this. What's the position groups you feel best about? And we've been through all those. And now you're down to position groups that have some good players, and we're hopeful about. But with O-line and linebacker and the secondary, lots of question marks. I'm going to go with the secondary as the group of those three that I think is most likely to be solid, and for two reasons. One is because I think USC is going to have a better pass rush this year. The second reason is Kamari Ramsey, who is a stud. That guy is going to be a big-time player. He was a big-time player last year, and in most of USC's games was their best defensive player. He has another year of experience. He is playing for a shot to slip into the first round. He should be motivated. That guy's really good, and I think there are parts of his game that he needs to improve upon, but I suspect he will. Ramsey was a pretty good tackler last year, but if you think back to some of the biggest games and the biggest mistakes, oftentimes it was a Kamari Ramsey missed tackle that was involved. I don't expect that we'll see much of that this year because he is a physical guy and he is willing to come up and hit you. But having a leader like that in your secondary, especially at safety, where he can communicate across the field to the entire secondary, is going to be enormous. I like Christian Pierce. I think he's going to be a really good football player. I suspect he'll start at the other safety spot, although I don't know that. After that, I think there's a lot of talent, almost all of which is completely unproven. So let's open up to the floor. Other than the transfer, who I think is probably going to be at nickel, although I don't know that. Let's assume he's at nickel. Who are USC starting corners this year, and how do you feel about them? Eric McKinney, can't wait to hear what you have to say about this.
So I think DeCarlos Nicholson is back and grabs a starting spot. It was interesting at corner last year because after you saw all the transfers and who they went out and got in the secondary, it felt like, all right, five transfers in the secondary, five new starters, and then Jalen Smith and Jacoby Covington just kept hanging on and hanging on and hanging on, and they ended up being the starters. So Humphrey and Nicholson got bumped, although both of them recorded starts and played in the rotation and all of that. I think Nicholson is a guy, and then I think it's probably dead heat in my mind with Braylon Conley and Marcellus Williams. I think Marcellus Williams ends up being my pick for who ends up as a starter. But I'm not just going to say that Braylon Conley can't do it. I mean, everything that we heard about Marcellus Williams during the spring and the buzz he generated and all of that, Braylon Conley showed up in the summer and then matched it during fall camp. And now in the first year under Dan Lynn and Doug Belk back there, they went veteran heavy all the time. I mean, it was vets and vets and vets. The guys who have played college football took a huge majority of the snaps, and they are losing a ton of snaps in the secondary now. So we didn't get to see a lot of those guys. Certainly not enough to be able to say, okay, I saw what they did, right? It snaps against Utah State to close out that game. Would have been great to see a little bit more of those guys as the season went along to get a better understanding of kind of where they are. But the talent's there. And again, everything you hear about those guys during practice, the way they play, prepare, all of that sort of stuff. I think we would have seen Marcel. I think there were a couple nagging injuries, that kind of stuff throughout the year. So he'd be my pick. I think Harvey ends up being a guy that could play multiple spots, but we saw how important Greedy Vance was at that nickel spot, and I think Harvey can do the same thing for you. The guy you mentioned, one transfer, Bishop Fitzgerald is in there too, and I think he's a key guy in the secondary. I think between him, Christian Pierce, Kamari Ramsey, you can do a lot of different things with those three safeties. And Dan Lynn showed how comfortable he is taking Kamari Ramsey and putting him all over the place, right? Kind of a third linebacker, kind of nickel sometimes, deep safety sometimes. Like I think what he's ready to do with Kamari Ramsey this year potentially changes a lot of what you can do in that secondary, and he's a big piece for them.
Yeah, you mentioned Denton Lynn. One of the other reasons that I actually feel okay about the secondary, despite the youth, is because I think Denton Lynn is a fantastic, not just defensive coordinator, but a defensive coordinator that really focuses on the secondary, right? That's where he's from. Doug Belk is a tremendous coach. If you just watch the difference Doug Belk made in Jalen Smith last year, you would think that Doug Belk probably deserved a gigantic raise. USC obviously has an additional coach back there, a new corner coach. Sounds like a really good recruiter. I don't know what to make of him as a coach other than to say this. Every other defensive coach they brought in the last 2 years really knows what he's doing. So I think it's going to be a really well-coached group. And it does matter that I think the guys up front are going to be better. USC made some progress on the defensive front last year, not necessarily in the pass rush. They're going to get a better pass rush this year because, let's be honest, it can't get much worse than the pass rush last year. That makes a huge difference. If you're a corner, that may be the single most important thing is how long do I have to cover this guy, right? Do I have to cover him 6 seconds? If I have to cover him 6 seconds, I'm going to get beat. If I have to cover him 2 seconds, I'm going to be all right. I think USC will be better there, and therefore I think they will play better in the secondary, even though some of the guys they lost were pretty good football players. Thoughts on the secondary, Mark, Greg?
Well, I think the secondary is very athletic, and that's important in this day and age, more so than, let's say, maybe 2 decades ago, because there's so much passing now and the field is so wide open. To me, I think that Kamari Ramsey is everything that you already said. When SC's really been good, they usually have a really good corner. I want to know how this team will tackle in the secondary. I want to see whether they punish people, so they're a little bit intimidating. I don't like to see a big hit maybe once a quarter. I don't want to see somebody, have a good shot at making a tackle and they don't, because when you look at the really good teams, their secondaries can make it. Now, one thing about Belk, he has not gotten quite the publicity that Henderson has gotten in recruiting, but he's been right there. And the thing about Belk is, if the secondary really performs as we all hope they will, he's going to be right there as far as whatever his future plans are. Hope he stays at SC. I have the feeling that SC has opened the checking account, the bank account for assistant coaches. And, some people are born with I got to get this player, and they really go after him. Well, I think the people they've hired now are getting very well paid. You know what? If SC has a great year, I could see maybe some contracts being rethought of to try to keep him at SC. But Christian Pierce is intriguing to me. I want to see what's going to happen with him and Nicholson. These are players who we know the names, but they haven't had a chance to really show it as much on the field as we might want. Obviously Ramsey you've seen enough of, but some of the others, and it should be interesting. It really should.
Okay. We'll deal with the remaining position groups next week. Let's close this down with a couple of it's a game show. It's a game show without prizes and without score, but it's a game show. Here's the first question, all right?
Geez.
It's the first question. Who is USC's next biggest rival after Indy and UCLA? And we're going to make a lot of people upset right now. I know it, because a lot of USC fans don't want to admit that there is a rival. But if you had to pick one, after Notre Dame, after UCLA, Who is it?
Oregon.
Greg,
Oregon.
Greg says Oregon. And why do you say Oregon?
Because Oregon has been beating USC and they've been out recruiting them up to now, so to speak. And they've gotten a lot of noise nationally. And I think when you win like that, and we get rid of the other teams like Washington, when Washington was good, and Arizona State, which is getting better, but they're not in there. When I thought about it, because I thought it was a good question, I thought Oregon, because you really can dislike Oregon because when you have the head of Nike throwing away millions of dollars the way they do, you start getting a little bit of animosity that whatever you come up with, he's gonna double it because he wants to see them win a national championship. I don't know whether they're going to do that, but I know that they're putting in a big effort. The real question I have is, because it's being in the Big Ten is so new, what happens when SC starts playing Ohio State and Michigan after maybe 3 or 4 years? You might sit there and say Oregon maybe starts to slide, or even if they don't, the games against Ohio, if people said, who do you rather beat, Oregon or Ohio State or Michigan? For me, I'd rather see them beat Ohio State, and then Michigan, and then Oregon in that order. But I think for right now, this time period, Oregon still can battle SC recruiting wise, but it looks like that's about to change.
Yeah, I sort of, to answer your question, I was thinking the same thing. Now that you're in a new conference, you're playing these other teams much more frequently. That's going to mix things around. Beating Ohio State is like beating Notre Dame. Losing to Oregon is like losing to UCLA. Beating Ohio State is a really good feeling, and it's an accomplishment. Losing to Oregon is a disaster. USC's had too many disasters recently. All right, Culkin, you're up. Who is it? Who's number 3? Rival number 3.
John McKay is literally rolling over in his grave right now. It's Stanford.
We don't even play them anymore. I get it.
What are you talking about?
USC's rival from Notre Dame and UCLA.
How can we be a rival of an East Coast team?
I'm going to say Cal, the oldest team, the longest running. I mean, it's Stanford. John McKay.
10 years ago.
When you want to be team 2000, you've got some animosity. You've got some angst against them for some reason. I don't think we care about Oregon today now because of Phil Knight, because of the last 10 to 15 years. That's their window. That does not make them a rival. That does not make them on the precipice of being a blue blood. It's not Oregon. I'm sorry, Greg, but that's just not a good answer. John McKay would be looking at you and like, what are you talking about?
No, he'd agree with me.
No, he wouldn't.
Yes, he would.
I know he'd hate Oregon.
It was even
though it's his alma mater.
It's not Stanford.
Okay.
Stanford doesn't even exist right now. When I said Oregon, I said for where we are right now.
I'm going to go back to the original question.
Let me ask you this. McKinney, you're going to weigh in.
He better.
I want you to answer the question, who is rival number 3? But Stanford is an interesting one because I think for most of my life, I would not have considered Stanford to be number 3. I would have considered Washington to be number 3. Much better program, a much bigger challenge than Stanford usually, at least up until Harbaugh came and changed the Stanford culture. And I probably would have put Stanford next after that. At this point, I'm not sure that Washington feels like a rival. It's hard for Stanford and Cal to feel like rivals. We don't see them. Who is it now? Who's number 3 today?
So that's the biggest thing is now, right now and going forward, and the change in college football and the change in conferences has changed it. They're both right? I think with Mark, it was Stanford as 3, but it can't be going forward. They're not really chasing the same guys. You don't play them anymore, and if you don't play someone. And maybe it's Texas A&M. Maybe they go back and eventually they're in the same conference again. And then we re-up this and it goes back. But for the landscape of it right now and what has gone on in the last 5 years and what looks like going forward the next X number of years, then I think it has to be Oregon because, and you mentioned Michigan, you mentioned Ohio State. You're going to start playing those teams, although you're never playing them like 4 years in a row or anything like that. Right now, there's so many teams. You play
We
Iowa
won't
this
be playing
year.
Oregon 4 years in a row either.
No, no, you're not playing any. I mean, maybe you play nobody even 3 years in a row at this point going forward. And some of these teams are going to come to the Coliseum every, what, 7 years, 8 years, whatever that's going to be. So it's hard to say that there's any rivalry outside of a team that you're really playing every year. But the difference with Oregon right now, and again, next 5 years, next 10 years, they're the ones that can hurt you with Southern California recruiting the most. And that rivalry aspect of it is huge. Michigan, Ohio State, they can come in and grab a guy, whatever. They're never going to get 5 of the top 10 in California. They're just Ohio State has Chris Henry right now. They could come get a couple guys, but it's not the relentless pounding of we're just going to take guys from there to take guys from there the way Oregon has and has made a point of just flipping USC commits just to get them in the class. Not even really to play them, not even to say, oh yeah, you're a big part of the thing, just to do it. And I think that's where some of the tipping point from seeing them as that rivalry, plus the games on the field lately, I think that's where it has changed. And going forward now in this immediate future is that's sort of the landscape now.
How much longer does UCLA stay as rival number two? You mentioned with Oregon that and Stanford. Well, they're not really going after the same guys. I don't know who UCLA recruits these days. I don't know if they do. Like, I don't even know if they have a recruiting staff and a recruiting budget. I don't know if they get verbal commitments. I don't even know what they're doing. If you can follow recruiting and still never hear anything about UCLA, almost like they're playing a completely different game than the other major programs are. USC and UCLA is still a rival in terms of an institution. They still have a basketball program. They're still a fellow elite academic institution in the same city. But increasingly, it feels like UCLA has no interest whatsoever in playing major college football. And I wonder if 10 years from now, we're still talking about UCLA being rival number two.
Yeah,
Maybe
because you
because of
always have to have the
geography.
city, right? You always have to have that. That's your first level. You have to
Yeah.
win the city, you have to win the state. And again, if they're the only team in the state, then that gives you that too. And then
But,
you have to win the
but
region.
at some point, it's going to become like an Oklahoma State thing, where Oklahoma has Texas and Nebraska. It used to be Nebraska as their rivals, and Oklahoma State was just that local team that they had to beat up on. Now, obviously, Oklahoma State's had some good football programs, and UCLA historically has had some good football teams. But I look at UCLA right now and I say at some point they're not going to be competitive with any of the teams in the top half of the Big Ten.
See,
And
that's
you
the
do
thing.
that for 10 years, what's going to happen?
But that's the thing. You're conflating and thinking, well, what's going to be 10 years from now? That's the difference in college football, the way we grew up with it to where it's going. We're probably not going to have any of these conference rivals anymore. It's going to be the Super League. It's going to be that NFL model where everybody's scheduling from the same pool of teams, whether it's 48 or 60, whatever that magic number is going to be. It's going to USC, UCLA, they're going to play every year just because you want to keep that traditional component of college football alive. We've talked about it before on the show. USC Notre Dame. Does it last? Will it last? And everything you're arguing for or against, I'm not sure yet, Chris, is what Coach Musselman talked about. Do the players really understand the USC UCLA rivalry? And it's because of the way the game is structured today with the transfer portal. You're constantly cycling in new guys every year, every 2 years, as opposed to every 3-4 years.
Even the Southern California kids, you look at the schools they're interested in. Who's your final group? Well, USC, Oregon, Ohio State, some SEC school, right? It's all the same with all of them. UCLA doesn't appear on any of these lists. I don't know if even the Southern California kids are going to look at UCLA as a rival because they don't consider UCLA to even be a major football program.
But is it?
And that's
is it-
not, and I'm not sure that's good for USC, frankly. I think having a UCLA that's decent is better for us. But
I can tell you this.
it is better for us, but until UCLA's NIL game steps up, maybe that's their issue. They've got Casey Wasserman, and after that, you don't hear anything about UCLA and NIL. Nothing.
Well, I'll tell you on that point, Mark, SC has not done a great job in keeping the really big hitters, the financial really big hitters, on board because of all the mismanagement they've had. I know some of them are really big hitters, and I can't tell you, and I think you know this, the disappointment in the way the football program has been run for a while. I think that in the end, I was going to say Kevin Bruce, our late beloved colleague at WeAreSC, one of the times I was sitting with him before his passing, it was, come on, Kev, tell me who is it, UCLA or Notre Dame? He says, if you lose to Notre Dame or UCLA, it really stinks. He goes, it's just having to sit in the same town for 300 plus days until you can play them and just shut them up again. But the real attention getter for SC has always been Notre Dame, because Notre Dame is a national product. UCLA has been good at times, as Chris has mentioned, but when you get right down to it, when Notre Dame is good, and I always hope they're good because it's good for college football. Historically, it's good for USC. I would just absolutely, well, I won't use the term. If SC detaches the game with Notre Dame, even if Notre Dame ends up in the Big Ten at some point, I don't know if they will, but if they did, SC fans still, at least the ones I know, at all ages, just hear in their head, here come the Irish. And I think it's good. It's also better when SC beats them, no doubt about it. But I think it's Notre Dame. They're always going to be the top rivalry for SC. They're private schools. The event, especially at Notre Dame, where so many thousands of people. I think if you've never been to SC at Notre Dame, I will say this: you will be shocked when you actually see how many people are in Chicago wearing USC stuff. It really is quite impressive.
Yeah, go this year. If you haven't been, go this year. I'm going. Go hang out with me. Okay, look, I think that all those answers are reasonable, and I bet if you had the current USC players vote, I bet Oregon would be well ahead of UCLA and maybe even ahead of Notre Dame. I don't know that, but I wonder. Okay, let's close with this. This is a new game called Who Do You Choose? I'm going to give you two names. You choose one of the two. You have 5 seconds or less to explain why that's your choice. That's it, okay? Here we go. Mark Holken, you're up first. Who do you choose? Ed Orgeron, Eric Henderson.
Oh, you're a bastard. Oof. This isn't personal coach dog work, but I got to go Coach O.
Coach O, he says. Eric McKinney.
Coach, we all have to answer the same one. I'm gonna say Eric Henderson because we still have to interview him at this point.
Greg, you're not intimidated by Coach Henney. Coach O or Coach Henney?
I'm going to go with what I've seen. And that's Coach O in the big picture. But
I'm going Coach O until Coach Henderson.
Him.
I'm going Coach O until Coach Henderson wins a national title, but I love Coach Henderson, which is why that question's tough. All right, Greg, you get to start us on this one. Carson Palmer, Matt Leinart.
Matt Leinart. Although Carson Palmer deserves the Heisman Trophy winner, but Matt Leinart came through with some really big plays and some really big moments. And I just liked what he did. Palmer was great his senior year, but Leinart was really good.
Eric.
Yeah, same Leinart. I think it's the multiple seasons of it and the way he kind of played through those expectations at the end. Just almost never a down game from him.
Mark.
I'll be the contrarian. I'm taking Carson.
Matt Ryan.
If Carson had a second year with Pete Carroll, oof.
Matt Ryan arguably has the best resume of a college quarterback in history. If you put Carson Palmer in Matt Leinart's situation, he does at least as well. The more talented guy. I love them both, though. Love Matty L. Okay. Keyshawn Johnson or BMW? Eric McKinney.
So Keyshawn was my first, like, that's it. That's SC, that's SC. But Mike Williams is the most dominant college football player that I have seen live, like based on position by position. The way he played wide receiver against opponents was more dominant than anyone I've seen play against an opponent.
Greg Katz, BMW, Keyshawn.
If BMW stayed what he should have stayed another year, I would say, but I'll still go with Keyshawn Johnson because he proved it. He could turn a game, change a bowl game. So I'm going to go with him, although I certainly wouldn't discount Williams had he played one more year, but he was awesome. There's no doubt about it.
Mark, who you got?
It's you take away that Kansas State game, and Mike was just like Eric said, he was the most dominant guy you ever watched play wide receiver. He was just the only person who stopped him was Norm Chow. I still don't know why they stopped throwing it to him in that triple overtime loss to Cal. I don't get it.
I was thinking that Ohio State running back is the one that really stopped him. What was his Clarence? What was his name? The guy that
Maurice Claret. Yeah.
Maurice Claret's the only one who could stop BMW in college. The answer is BMW. I love Keyshawn. BMW was an absolute monster and a force of nature. Okay, this is based solely on college play. Mark Carrier, Troy Polamalu. Mark Holkin.
Troy.
Eric.
Troy.
Greg.
Troy.
Two-time All-American Mark Carrier. Okay, two teammates. Dwayne Bickett or Jack Del Rio? Greg Katz.
Dwayne Bickett.
Mark.
This is for Lizard King. We're gonna go Jack Del Rio.
Eric.
Bickett.
I'm going Del Rio. It's 2-2. All right. This one's a tough one. And I'm not going to, if Tony Baselli, Anthony Munoz, Eric McKinney.
So there's still, right, that's the college pro. I think Baselli. At not just pro, but collection of college and pro.
Okay. Mark?
I'm taking Baselli because of the way he answered the phone when Jacksonville called him on draft day. That was just the greatest I'm going to rip that guy's head off speech I've ever heard.
Greg Katz, Baselli or Munoz?
Well, it would have been Munoz had he not been hurt and had played all the time. He had that little in between thing. So I'm going to go with Baselli because I think Baselli, while he didn't play on the type of team that Munoz was a part of, that offensive line was absolutely unbelievably talented. But Baselli was, I hate to use this term, but I think it's appropriate. He was an animal. He was an animal. And that's how good he was, that he could be on a team not as good as the ones that Munoz played on. But man, Baselli, when you really just concentrated on him, he was absolutely a man's man.
I mean, most people would agree that because of Munoz's injuries at USC, just as college players, you go Baselli, and if you're going NFL players, Anthony Munoz is considered the greatest of all time. That being said, Baselli at his NFL prime, as good as anybody. As good as anybody. Okay, here we go. Now we get stuff. You ready? Steve Sarkisian or Lane Kiffin? Eric McKinney.
Uh-oh.
I mean, I think Lane. I think Lane for the stuff that he did here was just so sort of comically ridiculous that it's a little more lighthearted than what Sark got into issues at USC for. Um,
Just a
so
little.
I think that's it. Look, it was wrong place, wrong time for both those guys. I think they both would have been successful had USC not been the first big thing that they did. And I know that right, there's NFL stuff and Washington stuff and all of that, but that's one of those you learn as the head coach at Fresno State, at San Diego State. Like though you learn what not to do and then you get to USC and I think it was just too much too soon for both of them. So I don't want to crush them, but the time at USC it's all right, that's where they learn what not to do and that's
That
tough
was,
for SC.
hey, that was way more than 5 seconds.
Sorry.
But
I thought I had to
you're
have a
right.
decision in 5 seconds.
Yeah, no, everything. It's all wrapped up. Neither guy was ready. I think we all agree on that. Both guys have turned things around, but I want to know, Sark or Lane? Mark Holken, who you taking?
Oh, Lane. Lane. Right now, Lane, personality, Hollywood, everything that's involved with NIL, Lane.
Lane's hilarious. He's got that going for him. Greg Katz, Sark or Lane?
Well, I try to say whose bobblehead would I rather have? I'll go with Sark only because I just didn't care for Lane, to be honest with you. I don't think he's a bad coach. Obviously, he's done some really great things. But if I had to deal with him on a daily basis, I don't know how much more mature Lane really is compared to the guy that I knew pretty well in terms of having gone to all the practices. There was something about Lane that it was like a kid coaching, and Sark I wanted to do better, but obviously he had his issues.
Neither guy was ready. Lane Kiffin, though, is much funnier on the internet. He even attacks Nick Saban. I'm going Lane. All right, the last question, and the hardest question of all. Clay Helton or Paul Hackett? Greg Katz.
All right, let me get that right. Clay Helton
or Paul Hackett. Those are your two choices. Who do you got?
You know what? I'll go with Clay Helton. You know why? Because he did have some big wins. He really did. I mean, the Penn State thing where they won in the Rose Bowl, that's got to be a prop there. And I don't know. You know what? It's a really interesting question. My hat's off to you on that one. I thought we were going to come up with John McKay or Pete Carroll, but I'm sure you
No. You can't go wrong with that one. This one you can't go right. All right. So Greg Katz is a Clay lover. Eric McKinney, Clay Helton or Paul Hackett? Who do you got?
I think it's Helton. I think the highlights in there are potentially better. Greg mentioned the Penn State game. There's a Stanford game in there where SC just ran all over Stanford. Like there's enough. The recruiting stuff I think was good enough to be sort of exciting at that time, completely independent from how things ended up going. But that's enough. That's enough.
Mark Holken, Clay or Paul? Who you taking?
Clay was a nicer guy.
That's a good answer.
Clay Helton won the conference once. He won a Rose Bowl once. I don't think Paul Hackett could do that with the Philadelphia Eagles roster. I think Paul Hackett is the worst coach in the history of organized sport. But Clay Helton, given more time, ran the program down worse than Paul Hackett did. Hackett only had 3 years. You give him 6, who knows what he could have done? Could look like UCLA now. Okay, so I'm going Clay. I'll take Clay, although that goes against everything that I stand for in the world. Guys, any final thoughts before we sign off?
Wow, Chris just picked Clay. This is on the internet forever, by the way. You do know that.
Yeah, I know. But if I pick Paul Hackett, that's just as bad. I don't know what to say. McKinney, you got something? Don't we have a deal going or something?
$1 for your first week right now at WeAreSC. And so spring ball about ready to kick off. I think they're going to get spring ball in just before fall camp starts at this point. They'll just go back to back and then straight into the season.
You got
So we're
spring
coming up
ball,
on that, and so first week of spring ball, go ahead and be at WeAreSC.
spring
Still-
ball, and there'll be 7 or 8 commitments tonight. You get on the board tomorrow. You'll be able to read all about it. Culkin?
I was going to say, still no official start date. We haven't heard anything yet from USC.
They'll
But-
tell us when it's over.
Yeah, they'll tell us when it's over.
Greg, you have anything you want to share? The people
No, I'm
want
about
to
to
hear from
tap
you, Greg.
out, but I appreciate your,
All right.
giving one last say, but thank you very much.
Nothing from Greg. Just get off my lawn. That's what Greg wants to tell you.
All
Okay.
in the clouds.
All right. All right. We're done, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Until next week, fight on.